Resistance Radio is brought to you by Black Swan Outdoors. Our mission is to help you realize and develop your self-reliance, whether it's in the wilderness or the city center. All right, welcome back. So this episode, we're going to talk about first aid equipment. And this is within the context of the 10 essentials. I said that I was going to spend some more time going into more detail about the 10 essentials and the things that you should pack with you. So the area that I want to highlight today is the concept of first aid. First aid is an interesting area, I think, because I for me, who I used to lead wilderness treks, canoe treks, and rock climbing experiences, hiking and that sort, and I have seen my fair shake of accidents, whether it be slipping on rocks, to illnesses, to getting something into an eye, to more extreme things like a potential spinal in the water, to bites from animals, all sorts of things that have happened. That happens when you bring kids mainly, but also adults, out into the outdoors. So I'm not going to say that the first aid kit is not important, but I think we stress way too much emphasis on it, and we stress way too much. I think we just in general pack too much first aid. There's a lot that you can do with the gear that you have already. I would really encourage anyone to take a wilderness survival or wilderness first aid course. If you can, take the Wilderness First Responder. It's absolutely a wonderful course. There's a lot of reputable companies out there that offer it. There's some that are not reputable. So just be careful about where you go to get your training. I would just suggest to research that. I'm not going to recommend anybody in particular, but Wilderness Medical Associates and National Outdoor Leadership School are the top two that come to mind. I had my training back with Wilderness First Responder from Wilderness Medical Associates, and I had one of the they were both paramedics. They were teaching. One was a search and rescue paramedic. The other was a paramedic that specialized in a helicopter rescue in the wilderness areas out west. So they were very knowledgeable, very experienced people. And what I kind of took from that is that there is definitely some items that a lot of people don't take out into the wilderness that are very helpful because they don't have the training, and there are items that people take way too many of. So, for example, Band-Aids. People take way too many Band-Aids, but they don't take a stethoscope, for example, because no one knows what to do with it. But once you're trained on what to do with it, it becomes a very valuable instrument to get a baseline on your patient and be able to monitor your patient. So that's just an example. So you can go overboard with the equipment. If you're a doctor and you're experienced, you can bring more than what I'm saying. But what I want to do is I kind of want to boil down the list to 5 very basic items that should be the kind of the foundation of the first aid kit that you can work from. And at the very least, these would be the 5 things that at least I wouldn't go out with, and that I would seriously just consider as the entire first aid kit. I'm not going to talk about gloves, but gloves I think I would add to this list. I didn't include it in the original list, but I just wanted to say I think it is a smart ideal to wear some kind of personal protection gloves on that. But again, I didn't add it to my list. I think I might. I'd love to hear what your thoughts were on this. But so here we go. First is medication, basic medication. Acetaminophen, ibuprofen, aspirin, and Benadryl. All right. Aspirin, this is really great. I mean, when you're especially with hiking with other people, generally older people that tend to kind of be gung-ho tend to overdo it a little bit, and that overdoing it is going to resort in pain at night. And having some ibuprofen can be beneficial. At the extreme end, the potential of having some kind of heart attack is very common and very possible under strenuous exercise when someone doesn't do that. I think of hunters in particular. They don't do much. There's some hunters out there that don't do anything all day or all year until hunting season, and then they put on their camo and they get their gun, they shoot a deer out in the woods, and then they're stuck dragging that deer up hills or whatever, and that triggers a heart attack, that strenuous activity. So having a little aspirin, may be beneficial to that. Benadryl, to me, if you can get enough down someone's throat fast enough, you can use it for anaphylactic shock from a bee sting. It may be helpful in that regard, obviously for any other allergies, and then also getting a patient or a worried child or a worried person to kind of relax a little bit and sleep. And kind of in that same notion, and acetaminophen does the same thing with kind of relieves anxiety. And it's aside from being a pain med, it also helps kind of relieve that anxiety and does kind of double duty. So with those three things, I'd say I'm pretty well covered. Now, if I was traveling for any distance or length of time in a developing world, I might add some kind of GI med. Generally, for most cases, any kind of Giardia or any kind of protozoa, from not disinfecting water appropriately, that might happen, or people not washing their hands and preparing food, which is also a very common thing while camping, and infecting other people. A lot of that stuff might not affect you until you're well done, especially that waterborne pathogen stuff, until you're well done off the trail, 2-3 weeks, whatever. And so I'm not too worried about that. And really, I mean, diagnosing a stomach ailment of any kind can be pretty difficult. Really, it kind of boils down to asking the patient to jump. If they can't jump, that's probably going to be something pretty serious. If they can still jump, it might not be terribly serious, and let it run its course, see what happens. So kind of thing, kind of keep an observation on that patient, but you don't need to evacuate just because someone thinks that they have a pain in their stomach and their appendix is going to burst, right? So those are the basic medications that I would carry with me. Obviously, if there's somebody or myself is highly allergic to bees, I would definitely throw in the specialty medication like the EpiPen and such that you would need, or glycerin or whatever the special medication that you need. Cloth tape is just so multi-purposed. You could probably get away with duct tape on here. And I personally use duct tape whenever I get a hot spot, throw that on there. Boom, the hot spot's done. I don't have to worry about blisters. I think I may have gotten maybe 5 blisters in my entire hiking career. And I've been hiking for years and years and years. And it's just keeping track of your feet. Wear well broken in shoes, change your socks, stay attuned to your feet. Throw that duct tape on, boom, you're done. But cloth tape can be used for bandaging. It can be used for mobilizing a sprained ankle. So many things, creating splints. Lots of great use for that. So, I think that even is higher than duct tape. A lot of people, kind of naturally gravitate towards duct tape, and I'm not disqualifying it. I'm just saying cloth tape might be a little bit more beneficial, but we can debate that. 4x4 gauze, excellent. You can cut that down into smaller bandages. You can use it for all sorts of cuts and scrapes, for cleaning, for packing wounds, to all sorts of stuff. It's very multiple functional. 4x4 to me is just a good size. So I would just go with that. It's just good compromise in size, and I think it works well. It's probably the only bandage I might carry with me personally. One thing that a lot of people don't talk about, which is also very, very important in my opinion, is a SAM splint. Now, a SAM splint, for those that are not familiar, is an aluminum kind of splint that's covered in a padding, and you can do all sorts of interesting things with that to mobilize, mainly your arm, but also somewhat legs, lower leg extremities. But what I like about it, or what I think is interesting about it, is you can make a makeshift collar. So many accidents that happen, whether it be you're driving down the road and you come across an accident, to whatever, out in the wilderness, and you see somebody that's fallen, you could probably assume that they're going to have some kind of neck injury, whether it be severe or not. You can't tell right away, or would you possibly be able to tell at all out in the field. And so being proactive by stabilizing their neck does two things. One is it protects that victim. Even if they don't have something, it's good to have that precaution, right? I've heard stories of people who have gotten into car accidents. They've walked out of their car, said they're fine, walked 10, 15 feet, and then collapsed and were paralyzed, or I don't know, temporarily or permanently. But they certainly had something wrong with their neck. And just one turn or whatever, and that's it. So I think it's good to be proactive. The other thing about that is that if you have to be hands-on stable and stabilizing a head, neck injury, you can't treat or inspect or do anything else other than holding that person's head. So this frees you up. This frees up the opportunity for you or other people to act and help into this situation. So I think it's a really a critical piece of gear for that reason. So splinting, stabilizing, wonderful piece of gear. It's lightweight. You can fold it up, takes up no room. I like to keep mine in the bladder pocket of my backpack. Seems to fit really well there. So SAM splint. The last is a triangular bandage. And I say minimum of 2, but I'll just say 1. But I really would say a minimum of 2 if you can do it, because you can splint with this. You can make a makeshift tourniquet with them. You can work head injuries with it. You can do anything that you would do with a bandana. You can do with a triangular bandage. You just have more material. You can make fire starting equipment with it. I mean, there's tons and tons of stuff that you can do with a bandana or with a triangular bandage or a bandana. And so having more of that material, just great. So 1, 2, 3, 4. In a severe situation, you'll be glad you had 4. You might think that it's a little bit over the top, but they really are very, very handy to have. From, like I said, the splinting to bandaging and beyond. So very, very useful. So those are my top things. And I think with that, and plus the gear that you have, sunglasses, backpacks, ropes, and all sorts of things, plastic bags, and there's all sorts of things that you can do and use to essentially kind of make makeshift first aid equipment with. So you don't need to carry a very large, comprehensive kit, right? What's all the rage now is IFAKs. With the series of mass shootings that are happening, and a lot of soldiers coming back from Afghanistan and of 15 plus years or whatever 17 plus years of war out there in Iraq, people are getting very accustomed to the usefulness and the life-saving potential that a individual first aid kit, trauma kit has, and they're kind of applying that into a civilian context, which I think is great. I think that's wonderful. I don't see too much of it being useful in the out of doors. I think I find it a little bit too redundant. Certainly a tourniquet might be helpful, but really you can get by with putting pressure on a wound and working pressure points. In a battle situation where time is of the essence because you're being shot at. I understand that the condition is a little different. You can take a little bit more time when you're in the wilderness to deal with some of those traumatic injuries. Not to say that, a bleeding artery isn't going to kill somebody within, minutes or seconds, whether you're hiking or on a battlefield. But what I'm saying is that there's some extreme bleeding cases that you could come across that could be dealt with pressure. And, in a battlefield, you can't make the decision. You just throw the tourniquet on and you go, even if the wound didn't necessarily need it. So I don't know. I think there's maybe some medical professionals or some experienced people that might argue with me on that, and that's fine. I just think we can makeshift that tourniquet with either belts or the triangular bandage. Back in the Vietnam days, soldiers were given triangular bandages, and they use those for tourniquets, just the same. So it's been done for a very, very, very long time. We've advanced in the technology, and there's no reason why to go back. But I just think that the piece of equipment is not as essential in that environment. I've done things from whitewater kayaking, canoeing to ice climbing and wilderness. I've never come across a situation where I've needed that. Maintaining airway, can be easily done. It sounds gross, but if you need to maintain an airway of a patient, you can take a safety pin and run it right through their tongue and pin their tongue to their jacket, and that will help open and extend an airway. So you don't need, any of the fancy airway stuff. We talked about, the neck splint, makeshift neck splints, which you can do with your SAM splint or the belt of your internal frame pack. A sucking chest wound can be easily taken care of with duct tape or fabric tape and a plastic bag. So there's things you can do to get around. Combat gauze, or heavily packed wound and an ACE bandage is the same thing as an H&H compression, really, and it's half the price. So really, you can kind of get around some of that stuff. So that's kind of my list. I say, focus on those 5. If you, I think personal protective gloves is kind of a given, and so I'm kind of I guess I probably should have, put it. I'm talking myself into it. ACE bandage also, I didn't include it in my list. You could go with an ACE bandage instead of an extra cravat. You can do a lot with an ACE bandage, from dealing with snake bites to, again, stabilizing a sprained ankle to many, many things. And by the way, most injuries that happen in the outdoors are musculoskeletal injuries. So, that's where you need to focus. Trauma isn't as common. And a lot of the other things that you might think of in cuts and things like that just don't happen that often, and can be kind of worked around. So those are my list. That's my list. I'm sure I'm missing something. I'm sure that maybe there's something we can add to that, and I'd love to hear what you'd like to say. So please let me know in the comments section, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please visit our blog for articles and more information at www.blackswanoutdoors.com, or check us out on Instagram.